Okay, I'm going to do a short reading and then you talk, okay?
Okay.
And the reading is by somebody you know very well, Richard S. Gilbert. It's called Gentleness in Living. Be gentle with one another. It is a cry from the lives of people battered by thoughtless words and brutal deeds. It comes from the lips of those who speak them and the lives of those who do them. Who of us can look inside another and know what is there of hope and hurt or promise and pain? Who can know from what far places each has come or to what far places each may hope to go? Our lives are like fragile eggs. They crack and the substance escapes. Handle with care. Handle with exceedingly tender care, for there are human beings within, human beings as vulnerable as we are, who feel as we feel, who hurt as we hurt. Life is too transient to be cruel with one another. It is too short for thoughtlessness, too brief for hurting. Life is long enough for caring. It is lasting enough for sharing, precious enough for love. Be gentle with one another. So, John, I invite you to tell us the story of your life.
Okay. Well, I'll be gentle with all of you. I got your outline, Lib, and I thought that was the best way to start. My childhood and youth and what mattered. I think that was, I've been reflecting on that for quite a while. I'm just going to start at the beginning. I was born in Lockport, New York in January 1930. And we lived in a house my mother and father had built. They were married in 1928. I was born in 1930, and I guess they had the house built, and it was a regular old center entrance colonial. I'd call builders modern at the time. I never cared for it because I thought it was poorly thought out as far as spaces go. So that got me off on the architectural kick. I spent the first 16 years of my life in Lockport, going to the elementary school and then the Lockport junior high, and then finally the senior high school for just the first 2 years of high school. Then my father got me into Culver Military Academy in Culver, Indiana. And that was a big breakthrough. It was a little more challenging academically, and I really enjoyed the military aspect of it. But before I went for the winter school, I went to the summer naval school, and that was an eye opener. I learned how to sail on a little lake called Lake Maxinkuckee in Culver, Indiana, and they had all kinds of sailboats and stuff, and I was just in my element. Once I learned how to sail, that was no more interest in power boats and all that stuff. And that was a great education. I went there for 2 summers, and I learned a lot about the nautical part of it. And the winter school was, yeah, I can't say enough for it. The faculty were inspiring people, and the military part of it was run by I forgot what they call it, but they have a couple of military people that come there, and you do close order drill and all that good stuff. And Culver was one of the honor military academies that was a feeder for the U.S. academies. So if you wanted to go after graduation there, you had a chance to go there, and it was pretty formal, pretty rigid, and pretty well run, I thought. And but I did not wish to continue that part of it. I was very pleased to have the military experience because it would give you a leg up if you had to go in the service. after Culver, I went to Hamilton College in Clinton, New York, and that's a very interesting small liberal arts college. Our presidents, I think it was founded by a bunch of Presbyterians, and Yale, which was apparently founded by Presbyterians, was sort of a feeder school for our presidents in the first, I guess, 100+ years of the school. The school was founded in 1812. And so in fact, it started before that in 1792 as Hamilton Oneida Academy. It was for the American Indians. And in 1812, they named it Hamilton College for Alexander Hamilton, who I don't think ever set foot in the campus. And we had a very strong liberal arts program. In fact, it was interesting when I matriculated, which was in 1948. The year before that, Greek and Latin were required courses, and of course, the diplomas in Latin. And fortunately, I think for my benefit, they discontinued the requirement. It was still offered, but you didn't have to have those two languages. So that was a big relief to me because I've always had a problem with foreign languages, and English is challenging enough. Hamilton, I majored in art history and economics. I thought I'd go into the advertising field. That was the rationale. And the thing I enjoyed about economics, everything is driven by everybody's decision to how they're going to spend their money. And that became a history course. And what opened my eyes, I was taking French, music history, art history, and the other subjects. It was interesting how they all came together. So the music of the period and the art of the period and the economy of the period that we were studying kind of blended. And it was kind of an aha moment where it kind of dawned on me, gee whiz, all the stuff is coming together, but you're taking separate courses, but quite interesting. And I was very enamored by my art history professor. He was also a painter. He did, in fact, I don't know if you can see in this picture on the wall. I'm reluctant to do it. I've got some of his pictures up on the wall. I don't know if well, I can't count them. That's too bad. Anyway, I remember when I was a student, and he painted a beautiful picture of the Oriskany Valley, which is the hill where Hamilton College is located in Clinton, New York. You look south and you look over the Oriskany Valley, which in the fall is just gorgeous, the fall colors and everything. And he'd made a watercolor sketch of it. He brought the watercolor sketch back to the art studio and proceeded to make an oil painting. Well, I very much wanted to buy that oil painting, and it was, I think he priced it at, I don't know, $300 or $500. Well, of course, as a student, I didn't have that kind of disposable income. And anyway, what was interesting when I asked him, I said, well, his name was Parker, by the way, Paul Parker. And I said, how do you determine what you charge for the painting? The painting was about 2 by 3 feet. He says, I charge by the square foot. Well, I thought that was an interesting little observation. Anyway, I came back for probably the 5th reunion, and I said, what happened to the painting? He said, oh, I sold it to the Munson William Proctor Institute in Utica, New York. And how much? $5,000. So I thought my taste was validated with the rapid increase in value. But he's done some beautiful work, and I do have a couple of his little pictures I was able to afford 30 or 40 years later. That experience and the art history and economics with a nice liberal arts major when graduation comes around, the kind of jobs you were offered, and I remember 2 or 3 And I wanted, as I say, I wanted to go I wanted to get a master's in business. Didn't have good enough grades to make it into the Harvard Business School. And so I said, well, what the hell am I going to do? And I had a photographic business while I was in college, doing, group shots of fraternities, and kids would have some injury. And it was a bunch of commercial photography. But I thought, gee, this is nice. You get $1 for every 8x10 print you do. And it was sort of like printing money. Of course, there's no overhead. And but anyway, so I thought, well, the best job I was offered, Bank of New York was offering $100 a week, and this is 1952, to go into a training thing with them. And DuPont was offering about the same thing, to be a night shift supervisor. And I said, well, that doesn't sound very exciting to me. And I forgot the third one was the grocery store manager. You could be a general manager. I said, that didn't interest me at all. And so I said, the hell with it. Came to Rochester and enrolled in RIT and took 2 more years photography. So I got a degree in commercial and color photography from RIT. And I didn't have to take any of their liberal arts courses. So I had a double major in color and commercial. I took another course in portraiture. And while I was there, I enrolled in the School for American Craftsmen, and spent 2 years in the wood shop there under a couple of excellent people. Tej Frid and Dick Wakamoto were 2 of the instructors. And I sorry, I can't remember the name of the guy that was the dean. He was a very interesting man. But the first year is all hand tools. The second year, you get to work with some of the power tools. And so I looked at the school. I said, well, the best thing I found in the school is a workbench. And so I proceeded to make myself a workbench. And anybody that's seen these things, they're basically like I think they're Swedish influenced. And you have a wood vise with a screw that has been turned out of wood for the vise on one side. You've got another vise on the end of the bench. And then there are slots, that's not the right word, pockets, where you have these little studs that you can stick in there to hold boards together, and then the one vise squeezes it together. I still have that. It's not in our garage here where we're living now, but it was one of the best tools I had to woodwork, and you made you use all the tools in the shop. You started with a black piece of wood and ran it on a joiner, and then you ran it through a thickness planer, and you then had to do dovetail corners. And as I say, it used everything in the whole place. That was a fun and interesting thing. Well, while I was at RIT, a fellow classmate and I, we started a photographic business. Excuse me. And we did I built a darkroom. I built a house, bought a house for $10,000 over on Alameda Street in Rochester. It's between Dewey and Lake. A very nice street, nice old house. House was built in 1928, which was interesting because it's the same age as my parents' house. And it was a little 3-bedroom, 2-story house with a basement and a detached two-car garage, I guess. And so in the basement, I made a darkroom, and that was an interesting experience. And we started photography, and the guy I was working with, Rick Warner was his name. When he graduated, Kodak immediately hired him. And I thought that was nice to be a great place for a photographer. Well, we would all go out on assignments, and he'd come back with a beautiful photograph, and I'd come back with a picture. I mean, it was dramatic. I'd say, we got the same equipment, the same everything, but this guy just had the talent that stood out. Anyway, we, as a business, the two of us had a few commercial jobs. One of the ones that was outstanding was we got the job to work for, and I can't remember her name now. It was one of the interior designers in Rochester, had the Better Homes and Gardens House of the Year, which was built here in Rochester. And she hired us to photograph the place. So that was a very nice feather in our cap, and we photographed that. That came out quite well. Anyway, after I graduated, I said, well, we got to do something. Oh, and in the middle of that, we got shut down by the city of Rochester because I had a commercial business in a residential neighborhood. So that was the end of the photography business, running it that way. So after 2 years of RIT, graduated an associate's degree in color and commercial photography. And I had all this equipment. You know, photography is sort of a nice hobby. You buy all these toys to entertain yourself. And I got hired by the guy who was the former director of graphic arts research at RIT because of the background in color correction. And Eastman Kodak had developed a process for short run color printing. And it all came about as a result of apparently research papers that were done for the United Fruit Company to show spoilage and stuff that happens on fruit. If you did that with an 8x10 color print, those were quite expensive, you know, somewhere around $1 a piece or something in small, limited quantities. Well, the short run color process was lithographic ink on paper, which was a heck of a lot cheaper. And it was based on the theory of color correction to compensate for the deficiencies in the printing inks to get your color. Well, that was all routine stuff for me. And excuse me, so I spent 3 days in the Kodak research laboratories being taught what they had. And this was a standard process, 8x10 thing on a duplicator press. And this company in Indianapolis decided they'd like to go on the short run color printing business. And so I said, you know, I don't know a damn thing about printing. I just know the photographic end of it, masking and color correction. And the guy said, that's all right. That's what we need. And we'll take care of the press room part of it. So I went out there for a year, and we literally built a building, set up a darkroom, and a little print shop. So we had a very nice darkroom, a very nice printing and stripping operation, and in one little crappy duplicator press. And from that, I talked to the guy and I said, you know, they're using our brains and their money, and it's just like printing money. These little prints are so easy and so straightforward and stuff. Of course, that's the insider looking out. And ignorance is bliss, and all the other things that are part of it. So I talked him into coming back to Rochester, and we started a little company called General Color Printing, doing short run 3-color printing. Well, I lucked out. My father had a friend who was in the manufacturer's representative, and he was selling preserved floral wreaths, which were imported dry floral material from, I can't remember where, somewhere in the Far East. And the mother of the owner of the company, I guess she was a grandmother, designed these things, and they were beautiful. And they had been marketing those in 2 colors, you know, using a black and white print and a second color over, like green for the greenery, which really was kind of boring and not very interesting. And once you photograph these in color, they were spectacular. And so we got the job of making a catalog for them. And that was the beginning of a very nice long-term relationship. And one of the things you learn in the printing industry, 2 things. One, the paper isn't worth the ink that's printed on if it's not on time. So time schedules are really determinants. So we learned to really rush. And of course, we're doing the Christmas stuff in June and July for the Christmas market, because you're marketing through your distributors or dealers. And there were 2 seasons for that. but it became very interesting because I then hired a photographer in Rochester to photograph the merchandise to our specifications. This was all done on 4x5 transparencies, and we strip and plate it and mask it and make the plates and do the rest. It was basically photolithography. The work from that led to several other very things. We got some very nice work from the RT French company, and this market of short run color printing is basically the manufacturer to its distributors. So there was never any large quantity. Maybe the largest number of things we print might be 20,000 units. Many times it was just 1,000 or so. But it was a market, and of course you're ahead of the market at the time people sell it. So that was I did that for about 17 years. We always thought we were going to build a better mousetrap, and we provided a living for ourselves, but not the manner to which we wanted to become accustomed. So my partner, Ralph, who was the research director that hired me, left the business after about 5 years and went to work for the paper in Buffalo. I think it was the Buffalo Evening News as director of research or some such job anyway. And I continued for a while. I got my biggest problem, as far as I was concerned. We had a very good quality product, but trying to sell it, and of course the rationale to come back to Rochester was one, it's a graphic arts center, which of course it is. If you had any sense, you'd realize that also means there's competition. And it's also a source of trained personnel, i.e. RIT. Well, I didn't anymore want to be on the floor as a production guy. I wanted to be the manager. So that was a miscalculation all the way around. But I got to meet some very interesting people who I had them as part-time workers while we were struggling with the technical problems of commercial printing. And of course, we had to go from the standard little format that Kodak had developed into a full-fledged printing company. So that was a little more interesting and challenging. We had a machine shop across the street from where we had the plant down on Exchange Street. And I was having him make, I don't know what I would call them, registration forms to register the films, because we're plopping 3 colors of ink and they've got to fit with each other. That also is true on a press. We just had a single color press, so everything had a register. And one of the problems with that is the humidity and the temperature and air conditioning. So we had to have a sophisticated temperature thing so that the paper would not expand and contract when you're trying to register one color after another on the printing press. So I learned a lot more about air conditioning I wanted to know, and had to set up some very sophisticated stuff. The same thing in the darkroom. The process control is time and temperature sensitive. And so we built some very sophisticated temperature control systems to process the film, the lift film and the masking film. So we would get essentially a controlled, predictable result. Process cameras were something that was new to me too. The process camera we had, I think it was 20 by 30 inches, and you have a big board with a couple of arc lights to illuminate it. And again, the time and exposure for that was particularly interesting. And it was just a good thing all the way around that we got in the film. Well, we got some other nice work. Versomatic company that made propane grills was a customer. Artcraft Optical, who made the frames for wanted to sell to their customers, which were basically your optometrists. I can't think of, there's just a lot of people. Oh, one was a hat manufacturer, and we did some work for them. And in each case, we're printing the illustrated catalog of the item, and was printing the price list. And I was shocked to see what things really cost. Glass frames in particular, they are sold by the dozen. And what the Optimus pays for a dozen is what you pay for one. So it's, the markup is, say, several 100%, but it's all part of the education. I think from a business point of view, and then, as I said, we did that for about 17 years, and then a thing came along called competition. Some of the larger companies, as my first employer wanted to do as well, got into this short-run color printing, and it was obvious to us. And printing is a very capital-intensive business. The printing presses are extremely expensive. I think ours was about $25,000, and that's back in 1954. And we, as I said, my partner had left because it didn't support us to manage to become accustomed. And then I decided, I'm working too damn hard for too little reward. So I sold the business off to a guy who I'd taken in as a partner, basically to pick up a couple of accounts, and went into the real estate business. So that was an interesting year, because the year I went into somewhere in 72 or something, real estate interest rates were double digit. So going out of the frying pan into the fire, but you learn a lot of creative financing and that. And having been in the business and financing and helping other people finance, so one of our good customers used to use, I think they're called trade acceptances. So I go down to the bank and borrow money to finance the work in process. And these trade acceptance notes were then, I would have to be paid by the customer. He'd redeem those. And that gave me a little interest in how to perhaps do mortgages a little better. And so what was one of the most fascinating parts of the real estate business was, people get retired and they want to move to Florida, and they want to sell their house. Well, good news, not many people had the income to support a double-digit mortgage. So what we would do is finance and balloon mortgages were very popular at that time. So we would finance the sale by having the owner take back a second mortgage, and we get whatever you could out of the bank. The owner took back a second mortgage that would all be due and payable in 5 years, and the owner had his equity in the house. If the buyer defaulted, he'd get the house back. Well, we never had a default, and you could refinance then, and everything was copacetic by 5 years later. I think it was an interesting experience, but having struggled with the credit and collection business of running your own business made me appreciate, and what's the word I want to say, a less I think the small business by itself, you realize you really need to be specialists in everything, and you would hire an accountant, or you'd hire something like that, or I could find some technical support, but you really needed every single specialty. And the big problem with a little bitty company was each employee was critical to what you were doing. So I had one guy that had a little drinking problem, a couple of guys, a salesman and some other worker. And it was amazing, after getting out from under that, you didn't realize how much stress you were carrying, worrying about credit, collections, employee personnel problems, just a raft of stuff. Anyway, so I was in the printing business for 17 years. I was in the real estate business for 30 years, and I've been retired for 25 years. So it was a pretty good thing. I
So
don't know what else
John,
here for you. We've got my childhood and youth, my work life, and my family.
yes.
My father was a physician. Ear, nose, and throat, and surgery of the neck is what it said on a little plaque they had on a wall in the office. And that was interesting to be raised in that family. And of course, this was during the war. I remember waking up, I was about 11 years old, and the radio beside me about the Japanese attack on Pearl Harbor. And so my father was older when he had me. He was about 44, so he did not go into service. So, but a lot of the younger doctors did. So he had to make up for all the guys that were in the service. So we were, the phone would ring at around dinner time, and the hospital was calling, "Doctor, we got a bleeder." And tonsils and adenoids were very popular surgery in those days. So he'd have to go in and patch up somebody else's work. Well, it was another case of the specialist has to undo the mess that the generalist made. The general practitioner could do these things, but not necessarily well. And so he had a lot of calls to straighten out somebody else's mess at the hospital. That was an interesting period. And one of the perks was he was a fellow of the American College of Surgeons. And I said, "Well, what does that mean, Dad?" He said, "Well, you got to do 50 surgeries, and it's reviewed by other professionals to see if you're up to the standards." And so I was always proud of the fact that he had made that distinction. And one of the other things, he had been invited by the Mail Brothers to come out there, their operation, but he chose to stay in Lockport, which was also a thing. But you realize as an individual practitioner, you're the source of the money. And if you're sick or if you're away, there's no income. And it's another kind of realization. Of course, today medicine is now a big group project, but the doctors at that time did not like socialization and Social Security. And one of the interesting things is he was not eligible for Social Security. And that's all the fault of the American Medical Association, who said, that's socialized. We don't want any part of that. And so it's quite a different experience. What did I leave out?
John,
yes.
At some point you got married and had 5 children.
I was going to say
about that part of it.
That did impact my life. I'm very fortunate. I had 5 great kids, and I still do. I think my oldest son attended my graduation from Hamilton. He was 1 month old. Joan and I were married in Lockport my senior year, and the senior year of my school. She became pregnant, and Harry, our oldest, was born in Utica, and he was 1 month old at my graduation. In those days, you graduated in June. But anyway, that was a fun thing. And then we had Debbie, which is my second daughter, and she's about 1.5 years younger than Harry. And let's see, Harry and Deb, and Dana is my third daughter. She lives out here in Henrietta, and is a grandmother in her own rights. Actually, that's why they moved there. Their son, my grandson, lives in, I guess it's, I don't know, Pittsburgh or where the hell it is, but very close to him out there. And then I had Douglas, which was my second son, and he lives in New Delhi, India. And my last kid, Janet, is in North Carolina, Asheboro, North Carolina. It's interesting. Harry married late, very much like my father, and had 1 daughter, Emily, who some of you may know. She graduated in religion from a college south of here. I'd never heard of, but it was the same school that our former minister graduated from. Friends, I can't bring it up. I can't bring the name up. But anyway, she's now applying for divinity school. So I just talked to her a couple of days ago, and I said, "Well, where are you applying? Harvard, Yale, Boston University, and there's someplace down mid-Atlantic, which I didn't recognize at all." And I was encouraging her to try Harvard. I said the places that have a big endowment can do a lot better for you. But well, we'll see when she gets accepted. She's outstanding. She's been worked for AmeriCorps for the last couple of years, so I think she should be a shoo-in, but we'll find out. And so and I say, Harry, yeah, my 5 kids, that's an interesting story, how I got to be a Unitarian. I was born into a family where my father's best friend was a minister of the Episcopal Church in Lockport, and also another one who was the principal of Lockport High School. It was the principal's influence that got me into Culver Military, because he had worked there in summers as an instructor, and it was the reason we went to the Episcopal Church was because my father was a good friend. My father made a statement which I enjoyed to this day. He said, "The only time I'm going to attend church is to be married and to be buried." And quite literally, that was true. But my mother thought we ought to have a religious education, so she dutifully took me and my younger sister, I have a sister who's 3 years younger than I, to the Episcopal Church, which was where my father's best friend was the minister. And so I went through Sunday school and all that good stuff, and I became an acolyte and did all that stuff. And I think at the charming age of puberty, I didn't believe any of this, but there were a couple of very nice people there, but I couldn't cut it. The acolytes got to finish off the wine. It was always a very nice sherry wine they used up for sacraments. So when we cleaned that up, we polished those little things off. It wasn't a lot, but it was good. And so I never knew much more about that. My father had a lot of reading of Unitarianism that he kept in his study up in the attic, and he read a great deal. And that was all I'd ever heard of it. There it was. I knew nothing about it. It was interesting, but that was as far as I got. Well, when we came back to Rochester, we after leaving Indianapolis for my first year in the printing business, came back here to start General Color Printing, and we lived out in Henrietta, and one of those custom manor tract homes out there. And again, I always building dark rooms and stuff. But from that experience, the kids are coming along, and I said, well, they need a religious education, just like my mother thought I needed one. And the only thing I knew was the Episcopal Church. And so I said, well, we're going to go to the thing. So we went to St. Thomas on the corner of Whitten and Highland Avenue. And Canon Cowdery was the head honcho at the time. And I didn't believe this stuff, but I thought the kids needed the Judeo-Christian education. So we went there, and I made some very good friends. We had a couples group, which we called the Saints and Sinners. And we were all young people, starting families and having a grand time. And I've met a lot of people at were the up-and-comers in Rochester. I remember Bob Bayless of Bayless Furniture was one of those guys. Bob Cashmore, who was a member of our church for a number of years until he moved south. And I've tried several other names I can't remember now. But anyway, I've got the kids all in Sunday school, and I'm teaching Sunday school. And I remember one day I had a class in Cannon Cowdery, made the rounds of the classes. And the only thing that sticks in my mind is I'm talking about truth to the class. And I think that, a junior high class or something. And Cowdery comes in and he says, "What's this stuff about truth?" And I said, "Well, that's sort of the way we should deal with things." And it was a aha moment where I realized that I was disturbing the stuff that he believed in, and anyway, so I continued. Well, Bob Cashmore, who was teaching one of the classes, and he and I used to chat a bit, and he was a real estate broker. I think that's how he got to know him professionally. And we were talking, and he said, "John, you got to check this church out up the street." And I said, "Well, I'd always been intrigued by the architecture that I saw, but I didn't know anything about it." And so next Sunday, I went up to the First Unitarian Church, and a guy by the name of Robert Nelson West was the minister and speaking. And I said, "Holy cow, I found it." It was just another aha moment. And that was 1964. In 64, Bob West was preaching, and I just looked forward to every single Sunday in the sermons. Many times you didn't know what the hell he was going to talk about, because he'd publish something in our weekly publication when he came to church. Because of what events that were going on, he'd change the subject, and so it'd be something different anyway. But always fascinating. We became good friends, Bob and Nancy. He went on a couple of sailing trips with us, and in fact, one of the interesting things, he was campaigning for the presidency of the denomination, and we'd be on the boat with our radio telephone, and he'd have to make a call to Boston or whatever to keep track of what was going on. But that was a very nice friendship. We certainly enjoyed that. And the same thing with some of the other people that came along the line. But it was a transformative experience. And I grabbed the kids the next weekend, and we all came to church. At that time, of course, the church school was overflowing, and the addition was just about to start. They're putting the addition on so they could accommodate more kids. So it was a very successful, very happy thing. All the kids went through the Sunday school program. I think that the only one that really took on was Harry. Well, I think my younger son, Doug, is. I think that is a Unitarian, and I think in philosophy, my youngest daughter is, but none of them attend church. So, as I say, they're sprinkled all over the place. But that was an interesting experience. And my first wife, Joan, mother of the 5 kids, died from lung cancer. She was a smoker, and we'd been married for 34 years, and finally the cancer got her. None of my kids smoked. We all tried to help her stop it, but of course it's so addictive that didn't work. And it was unfortunately a sad lesson of how much damage you can do to yourself as a smoker. But that was an interesting period of my life. I think what should I say? That and then Nancy and I met, whatever year that was. Well, I had a wife in between here, which was a big mistake. And that I can't even remember how long it lasted. I think I've blanked that out of my mind as best I can, but it was first class mistake. I divorced her, and Nancy and I have been married for 26 years now. So that's pretty good. So, and she has a lovely family. I've got a lovely family, and that was one of the great treats that of getting to know her kids and know her family and stuff. So I feel I'm very lucky anyway. Um, and what else? What else do I need? Something else?
Well, John,
Yes.
there's a question. There are two questions in the chat. Elaine asks, how did you and Nancy get together? And the second question is from Dave Friedman, and he says, how and when did you take up skiing?
Well, the second one, quickly, because the guy by the name of Dick Gilbert started the Unitarian Ski Club. And I think I'd skied a couple of times down at the park or somewhere. That rope tow was a terrible thing. And we joined the Unitarian Ski Club, and so we took the kids and went to all the ski things they had for quite a number of years. And that was an eye-opener to me, and a real delight. And my fondest memories are Mount Tremblant, where they had an excellent ski school and very cold weather. And we really learned to ski, or at least I learned to ski up there. And my younger son, Doug, is kind of a wild skier. Harry tried it. He broke his leg the first year we went up there. Yeah, I think Doug is there. But no, that was great. And the ski club, the people that were at it, you know, I think of them all fondly. So that was skiing. The other question, how Nancy and I met, that's a real interesting story. After I divorced wife number 2, I looked around and said, well, there wasn't anybody in the church that I really was that interested in. There wasn't anybody in the yacht club that I was really interested in. So I said, what the hell, advertise. And in those years, the Democratic Chronicle on Saturdays had a full page called The Meeting Place. And they were all classified ads, and they were free to the person who placed the ad. And people who answered the ad called the, whatever, 300 number, 800 number, 900 number. And they were charged, you know, some nominal amount for the phone call. So that was how the paper got its revenue. And so I placed an ad, and I'd looked at all these ads and looked over, I said, you know, none of them really inspired me very much. And I said, well, I can do better than the stuff I'm reading. So my headline was Sail, Ski, Dance. And I described myself. I was whatever tender age I was, and height and weight and my interests, you know. And I was trying to, you know, get somebody that might have a college education. Trying to do as much filtering as possible before. And then I left a recorded message. And the person who called the number would get my voice, and she, you know, I told them about myself and my background and my interests, and they could leave a message as well. Well, I got these calls. Well, I like bowling, or I'm trying to. Oh, one of the things I put in there, I wanted somebody who was trim. That's the word I use. And well, I'm trying to lose weight. I'm trying to. And I got all, you know, it was entertaining as hell, but most of them you could, you know, both the use of the language or whatever was kind of sad. And
how many did you have?
Nancy's reminding me how many I had. I had 33 responses to my ad. Well, it was over a period of whatever length of time the thing ran, but and having been in the real estate business, was a thing called the crisscross. So if you have a listed phone number, I can look up that phone number in the crisscross, and the crisscross tells me your name and address. So I could do a little weeding out with that. And so we got through, as I say, about on the phone, I'd, you know, respond to the phone calls, and, you know, if there was any interest at all, I'd try to arrange a meeting. And I would suggest, you know, well, you pick a place where you're comfortable, and we can meet for coffee. or lunch, but it's a place of your choice. And so about a dozen, at least, that we met for coffee. And so it was interesting to see the places and meet the person face to face, see if there was any chemistry, and not much. And that worked pretty well. And then I got Nancy's name on one of the people that called, and I looked her up and I said, hell, I know her from seeing her on XXI, and I knew of her family's prosperity. I said, that's a class above what I can support economically. And so I put her at the end of the list. And so I called all these other people, and we went out there a couple of times with a couple of them, but that was it. There was no real chemistry. So finally, I'm desperate, and I get down and I said, well, I'm going to call her. Well, it took us about 3 months to get together because of conflict. She was off to camp, or she was off somewhere else. I was off somewhere else. Anyway, we finally got together, and it was at what's the name of the place? The little restaurant in the 12 Corners. Huh?
Yeah, it's gone. I don't know.
Well, it's no longer there. But anyway, well, she showed up for, like, and I say, I already knew what she looked like from the TV, but in meeting her in person, it was much more impressive. She was very nicely dressed and you know, and very attractive to me. And I said, well, you know, I've offered my vote at the Strong Children's Hospital fundraiser. Every year people do it, and I offered it a couple of years to people who bid on it, and that was a fundraiser, and it was just fun for me to, you know, take people out. Well, we had two couples that had won the auction for the boat, and I said, well, would you like to be the hostess on my boat next Sunday? He said, oh, sure. So she came down, and we got the boat ready for the guests, the two guests, 4 people, 2 couples came down, and we went out for a sail. And then one of them said, well, I have to get back for my babysitters at 5 o'clock. And I thought, well, that's too bad for you. It's having a nice time sailing, a nice time meeting them, and all that stuff. But we came back to the dock, and I thought, well, fine, now Nancy and I get to know each other a little better and go into the yacht club maybe and have dinner or something. And they left. She got off the boat and said, well, I got a tennis match. Bye. So I said, that was the fastest brush off that I have ever had. And anyway, but we got together after that. So that was a interesting experience. And it was interesting to see how people see themselves, you know, in their when you ask for something. It was an education to me in self-qualifying, which was kind of a different experience. You know, I don't know how to express that other than that all these life adventures have been educational and entertaining to a point. So that was fun. So anything else?
Well, it's 1 o'clock, and we usually stop at 1 o'clock, but this has been, you know, you've had a long life, John. We could
Well,
ask
that's what happened. 91 years. I mean, there it is.
But I'm really grateful for you sharing your life with us. And we need somebody next week, folks. So